Imagine a single man, not a dictator with a secret army, not a general with a finger on a nuclear button, and not a shadowy villain from a comic book, just a quiet, smiling mechanical engineer from Ohio. A man who wore a bow tie, loved solving puzzles, and held over 100 patents. His name was Thomas Midgley Jr., and he is arguably the most dangerous organism to ever walk the earth. He didn't mean to be. In fact, he spent his entire life trying to be a hero, trying to solve the annoying problems of the modern world. But every time Thomas Midgley Jr. had a brilliant idea, the world got a little bit closer to ending. He has been called a one-man environmental disaster. One historian noted that he had more impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism in the history of the planet. And the story of how he managed to accidentally poison your blood, ruin the atmosphere, and eventually kill himself with his own invention is a dark masterpiece of unintended consequences. It is the early 1920s, and the world is changing fast. The automobile is no longer a toy for the rich, it is becoming a necessity for the masses. But the early cars had a violent, annoying secret. It was called knocking. When you pushed these early engines too hard, they would emit a loud, metallic pinging sound. It wasn't just a noise, it was the sound of the engine literally shaking itself to pieces. It was inefficient, it was loud, and it was holding back the entire transportation revolution. General Motors needed a fix, and they handed the problem to their brightest star, Thomas Midgley. He was a man who believed that chemistry could solve anything. He spent years testing every substance he could find. He tried iodine, camphor, and even melted butter. Nothing worked until he stumbled upon a heavy metal that humans had known was toxic for thousands of years: lead, specifically tetraethyl lead. When Midgley added just a tiny drop of this substance to gasoline, the knocking stopped instantly. The engines ran as smooth as silk. It was a miracle. General Motors was ecstatic. There was just one massive, looming problem. Lead is a devastating neurotoxin. Even in tiny amounts, it causes brain damage, madness, and organ failure. Since the days of the Roman Empire, we've known that lead is a slow-motion killer. But General Motors and Standard Oil didn't see a toxin, they saw a gold mine. They couldn't patent ethanol, which also stopped knocking because anyone could make it, but they could patent leaded gasoline, so they gave it a friendly, harmless name, ethyl. They launched a massive marketing campaign that carefully scrubbed the word lead from every single advertisement. They told the public it was the fuel of the future, but inside the production plants, the future was looking like a nightmare. Workers at the ethyl plants began to lose their minds. They started having vivid, terrifying hallucinations of winged insects crawling all over their skin. They began collapsing on the floor, screaming in agony. Some went into permanent comas. Others died in fits of violent madness. The press started asking questions, and the authorities began to panic. So, Thomas Midgley, ever the corporate soldier, decided to stage a stunt that would go down in history as one of the most reckless displays of scientific arrogance ever recorded. He called a press conference. Standing before a room full of skeptical reporters, he took a bottle of pure tetraethyl lead and inhaled the fumes for a full 60 seconds. He even washed his hands in the toxic liquid to prove it was safe. He told the crowd he could do this every day without a problem. What he didn't tell them was that he was already suffering from lead poisoning himself and would soon have to take a secret months-long vacation just to recover. But the stunt worked. The public was convinced. For the next 60 years, every car on the planet would spray a fine, invisible mist of neurotoxic lead into the air that billions of people breathed every day. The damage was catastrophic, but silent. Global IQ levels dropped as children grew up breathing lead dust. Violent crime rates surged in cities across the world, a phenomenon scientists now link directly to the brain-altering effects of lead exposure. We were literally poisoning our own potential for a few extra miles per gallon. But while the world was slowly choking on lead, Midgley was already moving on to his next miracle. In the 1930s, refrigerators were a luxury, but they were also a death trap. They used gases like ammonia or sulfur dioxide to stay cold. If your fridge developed a tiny leak while you were sleeping, your entire family might never wake up. The industry needed a safe, non-toxic alternative. Once again, they called Midgley. He went back to the lab and created something called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. We know them better by the brand name Freon. It was a chemist's dream. It was non-flammable, non-toxic to humans, and incredibly stable. To prove its safety, Midgley performed another famous stunt. He inhaled a lungful of Freon and blew it out to extinguish a candle. He was a hero again. He was awarded every prestigious medal in the chemical world. He was the man who made the modern world comfortable. Air conditioning, aerosol sprays, and safe refrigeration all existed because of him. But once again, Midgley had failed to look at the big picture. CFCs were too stable. They didn't break down in the lower atmosphere. Instead, they drifted slowly upward miles into the sky, where they met the sun's raw ultraviolet radiation. There, they began a chemical chain reaction that started eating the ozone layer, the thin, invisible shield that protects all life on Earth from being fried by the sun. Midgley hadn't just poisoned the people, he had accidentally punched a hole in the Earth's umbrella. By the time scientists realized that CFCs were destroying the atmosphere, billions of tons of the stuff had already been released. We were facing a global catastrophe of skin cancer, crop failure, and ecological collapse. It took decades of international cooperation to finally ban the substances Midgley had championed as perfectly safe. If we hadn't acted, the world today would be a very different, much more scorched place. But once Thomas Midgley wouldn't live to see the hole in the ozone layer, and he wouldn't live to see leaded gas finally banned, his final act of engineering was reserved for himself. In 1940, at the age of 51, Midgley contracted polio. He was left paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a bed. But a man who had spent his life solving the world's problems wasn't about to let a little thing like paralysis stop him. He decided to engineer his way out of his disability. He designed an incredibly complex system of pulleys, motorized hoists, and strong silken ropes above his bed. This machine was supposed to allow him to lift himself up and move into his wheelchair without the help of a nurse. It was a brilliant piece of mechanical engineering, a testament to his lifelong belief that machines could solve any human frailty. But on a cold morning in November 1944, the machine failed. Or perhaps it worked too well. As Midgley was using the hoists, he became entangled in the very ropes he had designed for his freedom. The motorized system tightened. The man who had accidentally spent his life trying to kill the world finally succeeded in killing one person, himself. He was strangled to death by his own invention. It is a story so full of irony that it feels like a dark myth. Midgley wasn't an evil man. He wasn't trying to cause harm. He was a man of his time, an era that believed in progress at any cost, and assumed that the Earth was too big for humans to ever truly break. He was the ultimate example of a narrow thinker. He solved the immediate problem in front of him, the engine knock, the leaky fridge, the paralyzed legs, without ever stopping to ask what the long-term cost would be. He looked at the micro and completely ignored the macro. The legacy of Thomas Midgley Jr. is still with us today. It's in the soil of our cities, where lead levels remain high a century later. It's in the blood of almost every person born before the 1990s. It's in the slowly healing atmosphere above our heads. He serves as a permanent warning for the age of technology. Just because we can solve a problem doesn't mean we should ignore the consequences of that solution. We live in a world of complex, interlocking systems, and when you pull one thread in the name of progress, you might just unravel the whole tapestry. Midgley pulled the thread of lead, and then he pulled the thread of the atmosphere, and finally he pulled the thread of the rope around his own neck. His life is a testament to the fact that the most dangerous people aren't always the ones with bad intentions. Sometimes they're the ones who are just too smart for their own good, and too blind to see the disaster they're creating. We are still cleaning up Midgley's mess, and we are still learning the lesson he never could, that nature always bats last. If you found this journey through the darker side of history fascinating, there are so many more stories of brilliant minds and terrible mistakes that shaped our world. We dive deep into the mysteries, the ironies, and the hidden truths of the past every single week. You don't want to miss what we've got coming up next, because the history you think you know is usually only half the story. Hit that subscribe button right now to join us, and make sure you stay informed about the hidden forces that built and almost destroyed our modern world. Thank you for watching, and stay curious. Would you like me to explore more forgotten figures who changed the world? Let me know in the comments.